Yeah, let's do that. Let's toss in your name into the chat box or raise I guess, a digital hand for to avoid chaos. Um, I'm seeing a lot of, and people could take themselves off of mute too. I don't think we need to be on mute. It's not necessary. So Jean-Sébastien.
I got four questions. I'd go with one right now. Talking about conspiracy theory and stuff to hide reality. I'm thinking about the bunker where Hitler supposedly died, and the wedding he had with Miss Brown, I think.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what's your take on it. Did he really die in this place and married the day before? I find this kind of awkward. And there's something else in the same order about Borman, his right hand and his son
Yeah.
after this.
Well, yeah, sure. A few years ago, I would have said, yeah, he died. Sure, yeah. Now at this point, after what I've come to discover about the infusion of Nazis into Central America, mostly South America, especially Argentina, which includes Martin Bormann.
That's the second part. Borman
Yeah.
in Argentina. I wanted this to be my second question.
Yeah. Who was brought in? I think he was brought in masquerading as a Jesuit priest and just kind of was disappeared into Argentina. No, yeah. At this point, let's just say I have no hard evidence, but I think very much in your line of thinking that
The wedding was a joyful wedding, not a tenebral one, I'd
well, I
say.
think there was a certain melancholy. I mean, a lot of their dreams to see the rise of the new age of Horus, that Hitler believing himself to be an avatar of Wotan, of Odin.
Like a reincarnation of Hitler after his death.
I won't say reincarnation, but he believed that he was the incarnation of Odin, and that's according to an intelligence assessment by Carl Jung, but also others who did good work on the occult aspect of Nazism. Nicholas Goodrich Clark did some good works on this. But yeah, I think there was a sadness that his plans didn't unfold the way he had hoped in 1939. But at the same time, his marriage was not so sad either. I think that there was a sense of we're going to live to fight another day.
That
Yeah, I agree.
You knew that Bormann had a son, and the son went to be a preach in churches, and not long ago he got in judicial trial for rape. The son of Bormann. Yeah.
Well, it's not too big of a surprise, but yeah,
Yeah.
I guess. Well, there's a researcher whose name I forget who did some good work on the second, third generation Nazis in South America with a focus on Argentina that were not only advising governments but also managing communes where a lot of child rape, a lot of abducted children would end up. Very few would survive and make it out of these different camps, I guess you could call them, on certain very secluded estates within Latin America. And yeah, it's disturbing. But there was like a cult ritual sacrifice going on during World War II, before World War II, and it seems after World War II. And again, a lot of these figures went on to advise various right-wing governments that were installed in Latin America by the CIA.
They were from Project Paperclip, or other kind of.
Well, it's more Gladio-tied. The Paperclip was a mixed bag. There were some good scientists, a lot of bad scientists brought in by Paperclip, but the Gladio was where you had a lot more of the NATO secret armies, where you had a lot more of the cold-blooded killer types.
Yeah. In the same order, the second question is about the blue eugenics. You talk in Quebec with the blue eugenics. Since it's right after Second World War and Nazi, it would be about the same time where Elon Musk would be technocrat promoter. So I'm wondering if there's links between those two. They have the same point of view.
Have people here who has read my essay on Elon Musk and the history of Technocracy Inc. A few people
Yeah,
have. Okay.
I did.
I highly recommend checking that out. That's going to be the last chapter of a new book that's coming out. And what Jean Sebastien is asking, yeah, is like, what kind of connections, if any, are there? And what I found is that the Social Credit Party of Canada, especially, was had some good people within it. Okay, and it was very active in Quebec, and there was a lot of crossover between the Adrian Arcand networks in Quebec, both of whom were promoting Nazism as the solution to all of our problems. The Social Credit Leadership of Quebec, as well as the Adrian Arcand, obviously. And Joshua Haldeman was the head of the Social Credit Party of Saskatchewan, who'd worked very closely with the Quebec social creditors, as well as some of those in Alberta, who were
Yes.
they were the
I know
ones
that.
publishing. It was actually the Social Credit Party and Technocracy parties who were publishing the Protocols of Zion in the English language in Canada, and in Quebec, it was the Adrian Arcand networks that were publishing the Protocols of Zion to sort of acknowledge that there is this conspiracy to get us, but then reshift it. Right? It's like neurolinguistic programming around it's the Jews, and then from that standpoint, the empires of Britain, of France, become the victims to the bigger evil Jewish bankers conspiracy, and then you start sympathizing with these empires, and it's that little sleight of hand that makes all the difference. That they always do that. So to answer your question in short, I don't know exactly how, but yeah, there's definitely all sorts of signs of overlap. Yeah.
I can leave room for other question, but I got one fast. I can shoot it right now.
Fast, go for it.
Okay, would you know the meaning of the six wing around the flag of the Nazi we've seen in one of these slides? I know the two golden is Zoroastrian past, but the six flag in circle, this one, I don't know.
I'll ask Cynthia's the one to ask on that.
Wing, the six white wing.
Yeah, I'll ask
Mm.
Cynthia about that. She's been doing a bit more.
I will.
Yeah. So let's
For
go
the
to the
last
next.
one, I'd say it's a more private subject later. So
Okay, cool. All right. All right. Let me just jump back to the chat box here. Steven.
I thank
Of
thanks.
course, dude. Of course. Steven. And then we got Richard. So Steven.
Oh, thanks, Matt. Earlier on in your lecture, you mentioned the kind of Nazi ideology, the religion, the occult, the Hyperborean kind of archaeological work and expeditions to, I think it was Nepal, all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, is it possible, in your view, that within this whole Nazi fascist hidden entity or quasi-hidden entity with its occult religious aspect to it, that there's a belief in ancient civilizations, advanced civilizations, and that one layer of what's going on in the world is a hidden, for lack of a better term, kind of like an Indiana Jones search for archaeological evidence of this, and that would be independent of whether or not that's actually true or not. So there's whether or not there was ancient civilization that's advanced, and then there's a question of does someone believe that, and some of the hidden operations are driven by that belief.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, there's tons of hidden deep civilizational truths that have been kept from us. And look, the oligarchy uses this technique called the Delphic method, right? So you go into the temple at Delphi, and what it says is know thyself, to thine own self be true at the top of the the doorway as you enter, to get an oracle who's hyped up on drugs to blubber some stuff that's going to be interpreted for you by a high priesthood to tell you whether to go to war or not, right? So it only works for superstitious people who don't know themselves, who would go in there and make life-changing decisions according to what some oracle told them to do, and pay money for it. But they're going in with truthful advice. Like people should truly know themselves, and there's a bunch of good advice etched into the doorway. So what they do is they take truths, and then they know that if people are going to go for those truths, it speaks to our soul. They want to control the form that it takes, right? They want to control the room that you walk in, that truthful room, and make sure that they're the ones who control that environment. So, like another example I got here that people have seen me pull up many times is Kepler's 1619 book, The Harmonies of the World, featuring how Kepler is discovering a lot of musical notes. He's an astronomer. He's proving his third law of planetary motion by demonstrating a musicality of Pythagorean geometry of certain proportions that are musically expressed in certain proportions on a string that have certain resonance, which he finds are congruent with what are the ratios tempering the minimum and maximum positions of each planet on the orbit around a sun at the fastest and slowest or closest and furthest positions on each elliptical orbit. So he proves that's his guiding theory, is he's actually taking Plato's hypothesis outlined in the Timaeus of a musical tempering of the universe that's tied to reason. It's not just irrationalism. It's not just like, oh, I feel musical, so it's like tied to a reasonable faculty of discovery that Plato didn't have the information disposable or available to prove that the theory was true. But by the time Kepler came around, enough hard evidence was accumulated that he had something to work with. So the thing was, Kepler, he wrote this book at the same time as this book is published. Another book was just published right before that by Robert Flood, his enemy. He devotes a chapter to attacking Robert Flood, this Rosicrucian Kabbalist who wrote his own harmonies of the world, right? But when you read the Robert Flood version, which is still celebrated in occult circles today, the Theosophists celebrate Robert Flood, Blavatsky celebrates Robert Flood, is that it's entirely based on the fact of the harmonic musicality of the universe. He acknowledges that in words, but then when you want to know, well, how do we know that? How do we manifest with that? It's entirely based on sex energy. So he's like, it's all about the eros. He has like a naked guy with his penis in the middle of the universe. That's his sort of drawing that he selects. And it's all based on this, this idea of just tapping into your vital force through through eros, that we become spiritual and we can find ourselves in an altered state. A lot of these people also were tying in, tantric, like different types of tantric practices in with the Western version of it. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because these explanatory models of reality are there for all of us to discover. The oligarchy knows that there's always a danger that the humans that they want to convince are cows will not be convinced that they're cows, and will look for more accurate explanations of everything than those that are acceptable only to the reigning elite. And for sure, like when you look at human history, there's so much evidence that there are some beautiful civilizations in Africa, in incredible things in the Americas, right? There's there is tons of evidence for transoceanic maritime navigating cultures that had economic, interactions between Central and South America and North America and Egypt and India. So there's evidence for that. And Femi Krasniqi to this day has done the most rigorous, competent work on this topic that I've ever found. I haven't found anybody who's used the quality of reason and rigor going into this topic than anybody else I've ever found. Now, this was being discussed by networks around in America. Jerry could probably say something about this as far as like people who were working on anthropological studies that were healthy in the 19th century and observing that you had really, hardcore evidence that there was a high civilization in the Americas that we saw a lot of evidence for that went back even maybe before the Olmecs. But this was all subverted by the Smithsonian Institute, by all of these agents that wanted to say, no. Everything started in Sumer or whatever. Maybe we accidentally spilt some seed, right? And then civilization started, and then we just had civilization. And before 10,000 years ago, there's nothing to be found. Close off your mind, right? So they've been artificially keeping this very rigid, fake explanation of civilizations. So I think that, when I look at Blavatsky, like her Secret Doctrine, her Isis Unveiled, the works of Charles Leadbeater, all of these are really important people to study because they created the I guess you could say the structure of the religion of restored global paganism that the oligarchy has been striving to do to overthrow the monotheistic revolution that Christianity, and Judaism and later on Islam played a big role at overthrowing those old occults, mystery cults. So there's tons of evidence, but I think that right now you've got people like Graham Hancock who are using the Blavatsky analysis of the Hyperborean root races. Like they add a lot of coloring, a lot of detail based upon a cosmology that's hyper Gnostic into what they think those ancient civilizations are, which is dishonest. And so the Nazis had their whole like deep anthropology bureau, and they were doing deep work into India and to Tibet and into Antarctica, and they were trying to find the hollow earth of Sir Edward Bulwer Lytton, and and the evidence of the races that went and lived inside of the hollow earth that are waiting to take back control of society the way Edward Bulwer Lytton laid it out and the way Blavatsky laid it out. It's all there in Blavatsky and Bulwer Lytton, these two Rosicrucian occultists who were into child sacrifice. These were like really bad people. So yeah, the Nazis poured a lot of resources into it. And today, Julius Evola is another leading, he was a leading pro-Nazi figure who carried forth the mythos that the Nazis believed in into popular culture in the 50s and 60s. It plays a big role though in shaping Graham Hancock's worldview, what he represents, other things. So, and they're now tying aliens into it too, following the Leadbeater model is now these ancient angels and things were aliens. So they're adding that element, and that's what the ancient civilizations were actually participating in, were these spirit beings from other dimensions or whatever. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, basically, yes, there's definitely old civilizations that are way super advanced and interesting.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that belief amongst the fascists, there's a part of the hidden agenda is exploring that possibility, hidden archaeology or invasion of the Middle East and, the Baghdad Museum, missing tablets, all that sort of stuff. Just wondering if part of the layer of what we're seeing is related to that.
Yeah, well, I think it's destroying every type of evidence that doesn't back up their particular interpretation of what they want their model of deep history to be, that we accept, and then reframing those pieces of evidence into, so if you see in a Renaissance painting, like a circle that's on fire in some background landscape, they want to interpret that or reframe that around evidence for that's obviously an alien being painted by that Renaissance painter. So they're trying to reframe everything, that they can. And then, like I said, any type of evidence that disrupts their type of mystical renovation of our own sense of our own image and origins, that they'll probably just burn down and destroy completely, using things like ISIS and others to just destroy. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, we got a few more people here. Richard had a comment. Richard Moore. Yeah. Hey, Richard.
Yeah, I have a geopolitical hypothesis.
Yeah.
And that is that at some point, David Rockefeller changed his strategy and he realized that the imperial approach just wasn't going to work. And his Samuel P. Huntington, who of course was part of the David Rockefeller clique, in his Clash of Civilizations, the map he put out there is exactly the multipolar map. Civilizational world order. And since the special military operation began, every single thing the United States and the West has done has served to accelerate the development of BRICS. It's like a partnership between Russia and the United States to bring BRICS into existence at an operational level. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. I think, to the extent that BRICS is going to continue to observe the WHO and the IPCC, right? I mean, that's what the elites really want, is to control through the climate scam and vaccines and all that. And if that's coming through in BRICS, then it's an end around.
Well, there's a lot of evidence you have to ignore to maintain your position. And there's some fallacies you're using. Like I could say that the KKK was made possible because Lincoln did what he did to stop the breaking up of the Union. And because of that, the KKK was created. So Lincoln helped create the KKK, which advanced all sorts of segregation and other things, which were super bad. But I could say that forever, like anything. Warren Harding prevented the League of Nations, but that that disruption of the League of Nations only made World War II become a possible. Otherwise, so maybe Warren Harding was an agent that did something as a fake opposition to make World War II happen. Or I could just do that forever, though. I mean, I would just say, when I look at, and you've read my stuff, so I don't know exactly why you said certain things the way you said them, because you've been reading my stuff, pointing out that their idea of sustainable development is very different from the definition we have, because they're doing things that are increasing abundance industrially, agriculturally. China's fought off the mRNA vaccines. Russia didn't let mRNA vaccines come in. China's battled for 3 years to not let it, and they still haven't let it. They've battled the GMO pressures to put GMOs in their foods. There's just 12 types of food products in all of Russia that have any GMOs, and that's through a lot of pressure. And at the same time, they're still, despite all of that, agents and deep state operations in both countries too. But as you know from my work, there's fights, clear lines of battle that have been, you can discover, that are against these cybernetic transhumanist operations in both China and Russia that have been underway for 30 years. So, I mean, everything the oligarchy does will get a counter response. Everything good people do will get a counter response. But it's like, you can't say that one caused the other just because one temporally came before it. I would say, like, they had full control. They had so much control of Russia in the 90s. Why did they willfully let go of that control of Russia in the 90s, or of China in the 80s when Soros had his man in power? Why did they give up that control when they had so much of it? Unless there was unless they were just bored and they were like, okay, we have too much control over Russia and China, we'll just give it up now. Or there's a fight of people who don't want to kill their people who fought against it in those countries. So, I mean, it's a different hypothesis. You have to look at which hypothesis is going to accommodate the facts more reasonably. But is what I'm saying making sense here? Or
thanks for responding.
Oh, okay. All right. Yep. All right. So, who do we have here? Susie. Susie said something about Hamilton. Susie, are you there? Susie Hoffman? Nope. Okay. Arlen, Cynthia. Arlen.
Yeah, hi. I'm not sure if Sue's been waiting longer than I have or not. So she had her hand up.
Sue. Okay. All right. Well, I guess you'll both go. I don't know who's going to go first.
Okay. Not trying to put pressure on anyone one way or the other. I wasn't seeing the hands go up. Anyway, I really appreciate it. I know this might kind of dive to this morning's topic with Alex Craner and some of the stuff he presented. But it interweaves with things you said about the Federal Reserve and international banking and such. And the question, or the point I kind of want to hear your thoughts on, is, so as Alex described this morning, that in the typical democracy or development of democracy, where the oligarchs are allowed to run corporate interests and primarily control or be involved in banking, which ends up controlling banking. And then, with everything that has come from the Federal Reserve, coming into place and everything in the 30s that follow, what is the mechanism by which we being the men and women on the ground, the people of the nations, what is the mechanism by which we can alter that the disparity that, as Alex said this morning, that basically they get all the power through all the money, and they keep their position above that, and it's above everyone else, and they're actually the ones controlling and running the government. So that, my question is, voting in a Trump or a Polyev or an anyone is just going to put them back under that same financial control and constraint that their puppet masters have over them. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my reason why I went into history was to see if there was a reason to have hope for humanity. Like, so I originally kind of went into a state of despair in 2004 or so when I started looking into this whole, New World Order approach to history.
Yeah.
And so I got blue. I was very blue, to put it mildly. And so my engine started revving because I was like, well, either all of history has been a joke to bring us to this, place that's been planned for thousands of years of mass kill, or there's been a fight, and maybe the things that I take for granted, like my ability to read, to have literacy, to if I get, I break, if I break my leg, I can get, a hospital. So maybe this all of this stuff here, this electricity that seems to keep my food cold. Maybe there was a fight. Maybe, I don't know though. So I started researching things.
Don't you think there would have to be, Matt? Don't you think there would have to be a fight? Because if there was just an oligarchical control of, which I believe it was spoken of this morning, which we've talked about previously, that it is the path of destruction. It isn't just, it's not about money. It's not about control anymore. There is you said a couple times today already as well, that it's baked into the cake that the current financial system is headed for some kind of implosion, some kind of built-in failure.
Yeah.
So I guess the question, or the thing that came up from what you just said, which I'm agreeing with, is that there is a fight. There is an other that isn't just the power of that force, that oligarch with all the financial control that is running the show. Because if they were just running the show, then
we wouldn't have left the Stone Age, as far as I could
say.
Exactly. So all of everything I do as far as my research and what I publish, and I've made a few discoveries, and when I look for my allies who do co-research, I'm looking for people who are on the same hypothesis, who have borne fruit. So I know, Jerry's work, he's written a bunch of books, he's made a lot of discoveries in history. The thing that we're sort of tuned into is where are the points that human beings rose to the occasion, broke from their expected mode of animalistic behavior in order to be sublime and to be courageous, to be willing to die for the sake of the health of your soul and your ideals. And then map out where in all different cultures and different periods of time did that emerge, and how did that undermine the oligarchy's ideals of keeping a stasis of depopulated human dogs in place. So that's everything I do is based on that. I'm trying to figure out, well, what works, what are they afraid of? So I don't have some of the subtle, detailed mechanisms for practical action. I don't have some of those things. What I know is what works, and I'm trying to put my discoveries out there so that other people resonate with that, in order to look at, well, what took down the oligarchy when we did Glass-Steagall, when we did, there's a variety of things that we've done throughout history that work really good. And then, are there places in the world today where similar principles are being acted upon politically, militarily? And yes, I do find an array of those things being acted upon, but not in my part of the world here. I see it more in Eurasia than I see it in our part of the world. So I know that we need, the banks are going to collapse. It's going to kill a lot of people. People are going to go crazy. I know that it's going to happen. Since I know that we've got a tsunami coming at us, I could just stand at the shore waiting for the tsunami, or I could do things. In our case, I know that if you had a citizens mobilization with very concrete demands and expectations that are not just let's have a big kumbaya, but let's get Glass-Steagall before it happens. Let's let the banks take the pain, and let's protect the real economy. But you need to have people organized around that. And so few people that I encounter have their minds rigorous enough and disciplined enough to organize processes around direct, specific policies. Or on the other hand, I talk to a lot of people who know so much about how bad it is that they're convinced that the only thing to do is go local, decentralize, and forget about the nation. And it's I think if you give up the fight to take back control of the sovereign nations, you're dead. I think that they're going to kill us, most of us, if we don't use the nation state as an instrument of defense and offense, the way I see certain patriots have been able to do in Eurasia. I don't see that in our part of the world at this moment. Except for maybe Trump. There's something maybe human around Trump, in Trump, which I see as organizable. This person, Joe, keeps on turning off his mute. Thanks, Joe.
You mentioned a mechanism. So the mechanism by which a group of people can come together to have demands and expectations. And of whom are those demands and expectations to be made of? The politicians, the political class?
You got to organize, like, for example, I'm in direct communication with at least 7 people who are directly talking to RFK and Trump. I directly. I mean, human beings organize other people. Do they think like me? Not really, but are they humans who are trying to figure things out? Yeah. Are they open to my briefings? Yeah. So I'm saying you got to think about organizing around higher idea sets that have a practical applicability politically, and try to make it happen in any way you can. I mean, whether it's organizing town halls, whether it's organizing in any opportunity you can, but the problem is people want to like act first and think less. And so a lot of people, they make a mess of things because they go out and they try to take some action or and they don't know, they haven't taken the time to fully earn what they're saying. And then they sound like they make a mess of what they're trying to say. And people think they're crazy or whatever. Or they try to do things in an unlawful way. They try to move too fast on something that takes time. So I'm just saying, like, we need to take back control of the nation state. And the only thing viable that I see in North America is in the MAGA movement in the US that's highly contaminated by agents and vipers. But there are good people and humans as well who, because they're human, they can be organized around policy. That's the only thing I see. Other than that, I see nothing. I don't see anything that's viable in my society.
Well, but you say that throughout history there is this clear, these different situations. The Lincoln time was one of them that creating this different currency in order to gain control of that, so that they could spawn creativity and production in the whole railway development plan that they did.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the issue there, number one, they killed him, but number two, that didn't sustain. And so JFK is saying, hey, I see now we have some problems. Well, he's dead. And so who killed him and why? Well, we all know the answers. I think we do know the answers to that. So now Trump, like, why is he's in that same restriction that there's such a mass. Okay, sorry, I'm jumping back to what you already said. So let's move on. So the point that there is this fight, that there is an alternate to the, I put it in terms of goodness and evil, so that there's an evil force that's destructive and corrosive and wants to be the boss and tell everybody else what to do and steal all their stuff. And then there's a force of good that, has love and truth and beauty, like we've talked about before. And so that force is embodied in people and in groups. But I guess what I'm looking for is that what is the non-political method by which that force can be multiplied in we humans who actually are men and women with hearts and souls and love in those hearts and souls?
Yeah, I think being a loving, good person is very important, and learning how to build communities and build skill sets that are practical are very good things to do as far as the capacity building, as far as spiritual and mental capacity building and physical capacity building. That's good to do. And I'm for, like my wife and I, we teamed up with a friend and got a little house outside of Montreal near farm country to, we try to keep a network of people because we have backup plans. I'm not going to just put all of my eggs in one basket and just be like, okay, it's all or nothing. I'm like, okay, if shit hits the fan, I want to be able to have something that could, at the very least, second best, keep my loved ones, people I care about, and ourselves, in some degree of less pain as possible. But that being said, I'm aware of what it is and what it isn't. It's not the solution. I got some cash I pulled out of the bank.
It might be. It might be your solution because, Matt, by taking responsibility for yourself and your wife and saying, hey, I'm actually going to do something to cause a change in my reality, you did that already. And you have a alternate plan should shit hit the fan, away you go. And I mean, I think that's great. And I think that's what we all can do. And even in a community of well, it doesn't, people say like-minded, and that's a pretty tricky one, but just have some connection to the people in your immediate community. And I mean, even being on these calls, like that we're doing the Zoom thing, there's people all over the world that are starting to connect. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's,
yeah.
I guess I leave it with the thought, that thing that you say that is the fight, that there is a fight, that there has been in history this thing where this rising keeps coming back so that humanity is not just wiped out. And I guess that identity of who and what that is,
Yeah.
in a spiritual sense, is, to me, for me, that's what it is. That is participating and expressing in those people who are doing those things, just like it is. There is a force that I believe of evil and darkness that is expressing and working through the people that are making those things happen. So,
Oh yeah, no, that's good. I appreciate that, and we'll move to the next question. But I'll just respond once more to a thought that awoke. You know, like there's I think it's good to do all good at every amplitude. I just talk to so many people who get delusional about what it is that they're doing when they're detaching from their grid and like building their local garden. And I know people who had little self-sustained areas that they thought that they were safe from in northern Quebec, and they found their houses wiped out in controlled fires. Just like we've had people in Alberta as well who've had controlled fires that destroyed what they thought was their off the grid little like safe zone with their solar panels. So it's like or look at Lahaina, right? Freaking space lasers. I mean, what the hell? So I just don't want to make it out to be more than it is. It's like, do whatever you can to have like reserves of food, capacity build. You know, if you're able to have some place to grow some food, do that. If you can, a lot of people can't. So, you know, but it's like, don't think it is the thing that's going to keep us safe. That's just like, just what you do, right? You're in the water, you try to swim, right? Ideally hold on to something that floats, you know. It's like you shouldn't be in the water. If you could avoid falling into the middle of the ocean, avoid that. Yeah. So anyway,
Thank
yeah,
you.
Sue. Yeah, no problem, dude. Yeah, Sue.
Hi, Matt.
Yeah.
You had mentioned the skull and bones having a deeper roots into the occult.
Oh, sure.
And my question links in with what Stephen had brought up. So just for a little bit of background, I've mentioned before my ancestors were the Puritans. They came over. So the Mix clan donated all the land to for Yale University. And then I think about Cotton Mather, and who was it, he or his son who was the mentor to Benjamin Franklin?
Cotton Mather, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's that stream from Yale University that's beautiful, but then the skull and bones. And so we only ever had one family reunion, and a fellow came up from the US and he showed a picture of his grandfather, great-grandfather, who was Hiram Bingham III, and he showed a picture of him, and that's who Indiana Jones was
Based on?
based upon.
No.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and he was the governor of Connecticut for one day, and he was a senator, but he was the guy who discovered Machu Picchu. And he was searching for Vilcabamba, the lost city of Vilcabamba. So I've been meaning to do more research on it. But anyways, and then it was his son who became a senator for 9 terms, and became head of different UN organizations and really fought to shut down all of nuclear power production.
Whoa.
So then when Alex Demetrius, you know, he seemed to come full circle in his, where he found that family line, and the son became a senator too and was shutting down. I'm thinking, oh, this Brigham the 4th or the 5th, whatever it was, you know, they were probably working together, but Brigham's went through skull and bones too. So I'm just, yeah. So that's what, a part of history that I don't fully understand. You've said the Dutch bankers went into the city of London and took control in 1688. So my envisioning is that they were ticked off with the Puritans, and so they came in through Yale University to subvert some of that. But
It's an interesting set of considerations, Sue, you're bringing in. I mean, the whole Hiram Bingham the Third, I didn't know about that or him. It's interesting. Definitely the Skull and Bones secret society. I think that was like 1833. And I from what little I do know, I think Webster Tarpley wrote a book on it. I never read it though. Um, is that it was based on this Russell family, not Bertrand Russell, another Russell family in America. Maybe there's a relation who founded it as sort of like a, a way to groom the next generation. So they're just thinking about being more disciplined with finding talent from the talent pool, and obviously the talent pool would typically be more easy to acquire out of some of the vetted families that had already sold their souls, you know, and so it's just easier if you're like. That's why so many of these big tech transhumanist cardboard cutout types tend to come from families that are deeply embedded in DARPA and the U.S. military establishment. So many of them, not because it's not necessarily that the families were like, okay, we're gonna give our son to the thing. It's just like that's convenient. The fact that Justin Trudeau is the child of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and Pierre Elliott Trudeau was a London School of Economics, groomed Jesuit, before that Jesuit groomed young elitist who just loved Adrian Arcand. He was a champion for Adrian Arcand in and after World War II. But it's just like, okay, it's convenient, and there's, I think, a certain psychological loyalty young people have to their respected families. So it's kind of like they're captured in my mind, and the Skull and Bones definitely has some weird Templar connections to it, right? The whole Skull and Crossbones thing is very Templar. But I didn't do a lot of that work. It's just that's how they groomed the U.S. establishment, and it seemed to have happened at a time when you had that whole. I wrote a chapter I made it available on the Mormon purge of American Republican Freemasonry, and that was something that was going on between 1826 and 1840. Was this massive coup d'état and a total war purge of all of the lodges, because there were different lodges that were battling each other. Some of them were tied to really good things. And everybody who was like a serious threat to the oligarchy, or the vast majority of the Republican lodges, were destroyed in the anti-Masonic movement, which was run by a bunch of, ironically, Freemasonically connected Mormons tied to a guy who shares a similar name to the Hiram, was it Brigham Young?
Yeah, Brigham, just Hiram Brigham, yeah.
That's probably just the name is just a coincidence, I'm sure, to this other dude, right?
Yes, it is. I thought maybe, but I think it's just
it's the last name anyway. Yeah, but all that to say, that's so they've been trying to take the schools. That's always if you can get the Ivy League schools to fall, then you got a huge control over the system, because they think multi-generationally. And Harvard, I think that was what you were trying to say, was Harvard was the one that Cotton Mather was working through. And John Winthrop had overseen earlier.
Yeah, but my ancestors came over with John Winthrop.
They did.
So they were.
No, yeah, right. I mean, it's very likely. I mean, there's something really good that was organized within the Puritan groupings in England, and there's a guy named Graham Lowry. Have you read Graham Lowry's book, How the Nation Was Won?
I've got his book.
Oh, you do?
Because you and I started it, but I've got 20 books on the go. So.
Okay. That one is a treat. It's so well written.
Yeah.
It's and it really goes through that story of those Republican, higher level people who are operating within England, that participated in the English Civil War that turned into a messy bloodbath. It didn't, there were agents on all sides. But there were really good people as well. And a lot of them were like, okay, we need to get into a space far removed from this oligarchical European corruption, that we can actually build something that won't be sabotaged after 2 seconds. So that whole story, Graham Lowry tells it, and how Harvard was formed, and the battle over what was going to be the character of Harvard. Yale, I don't know if it was ever good, but yeah, maybe. Probably, if you're saying that there's these connections to these positive networks that you're born into. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Could you so just one last question about that. So the Indiana Jones, because I recently saw you suggesting to, I think it was a Swiss group, take a look at Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons
Yeah.
to see what the oligarch actually believe.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if Indiana Jones would have some clues in terms of the occult beliefs.
Yeah. Well, definitely it was is that Spielberg or Lucas or both? It's both, right? Who did Indiana Jones?
Spielberg, I think, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
Not sure either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana Jones, he's a weird character that they created. Originally, they wanted to make him a pedophile. There were the transcripts for the original discussions that between Spielberg and his writing team that were all transcribed and they were made public. And they wanted, I think it was for is it the Lost Ark? I think it's the Lost Ark storyline, where he goes to like Tibet and he meets his lost love or his long lost love who was a younger girl when they had a relationship, and she's now like managing a bar or something. I think it's the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm not sure. And anyway, in the original script, she was supposed to be 11 years old when they actually had a relationship. That's what Spielberg wanted, and then they came to the decision that the people would respond poorly. Their audience wouldn't respond well if that's how old she was. So they're like, let's just say she was probably more like 15 or 16. Okay, that's maybe they'll accept that. So that was like implicitly like what in there. Side note, just the side note. But no, I think that those stories are definitely showcasing a watered down version of what the oligarchy actually does have, as they do believe these things as far as their inner sacred myths that they created for themselves. And I don't know whether at some point there's a strata of the oligarchy that knows these were just created stories. The idea of the Merovingians being the heirs to the bloodline of Jesus who didn't die and had the babies, and then they're the best noble families, and that's for the Dan Brown stories. Their obsession with the Lost Ark, the Ark of the Covenant, the
which was Indiana,
huh?
Which was Indiana Jones.
Yeah, that was,
right?
And that's what Charles Warren was obsessed by. The guy who was like overseeing the Quattro Coronati Lodge and the Jack the Ripper murders. That Charles Warren was obsessed with finding the ark of the ark within the underground enclaves under Solomon's Temple, which is also where the Templars were making their home base. That's where the Royal Arch Freemasonry was revived by Charles Warren in 1868. Under Solomon's Mines, so they're obsessed with this stuff. The what do you call it? The
Palace, the Grail.
Yeah,
sorry.
The Grail. That idea of drinking from the cup that held the blood of Christ that has the immortality, and you'll all have immortality if you drink from that blood. Yeah, Hitler was into that stuff. He was actually like obsessed with finding like the spear that killed Jesus, the spear of destiny. He was obsessed with finding the spear because he thought it would give him immortal power, magical powers to conquer the world. It was popular. He's big into the Grail myths that were a big propaganda device that drove the recruitment of a lot of Crusaders and Templars in the 12th and 13th and 1400s in Spain and in England. The troubadours were pushing the stuff, who were also largely controlled by a lot of the Gnostic cults of the Cathars, the Templars, who had all sorts of different cultural aspects to them. So they were pushing these Grail myths, which are just initiatory rites that would make people become useful wannabe knights and heroes going off to save damsels and fight evil demons abroad. And that was useful for recruiting soldiers to the Crusades. That's what it was for. And also creating an elite class of knights, which Hitler, under his new Templars, because that's what's not Goering, the other guy, Himmler had Wewelsburg Castle that he had built for himself to be the inner sanctum of the new Templar order of the Templar Knights, of which there would be 12. They did weird sacrifices. It's still there. It's a thing, but they're obsessed with all of this stuff. So yeah, they do diluted versions in a lot of these Hollywood movies, partially, I think, to just destroy people's ability to judge this as being crazy and understand it, and instead think that this is just another variation of entertainment, and the whole fantasy reality division becomes very blurry in most people's minds, so that when you talk about this stuff, they think you're crazy because it's like, no, that's Hollywood movies. You crazy conspiracy theorist seem to think Hollywood movies are how reality is shaped, crazy person. And it's like, well, it's nuanced. So that's my thoughts there.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I wanted to share, I'm hoping to, I was at the BC Conservative gathering last night, and I knew a person, and she's got all your books, and I have some friends who are reading you now, and so hoping to, do a film gatherings of your work as a way to where we can have dialogue and start opening this up. So,
cool.
Just one step at a time, right? In our own little communities, doing what we can.
Yeah, that warms my heart, Sue. Thank you. And yeah, like a big reason why we do what we do is we're hoping that people have movie nights, or they watch our movies,
Yes.
and that just gives conversation for the rest of the night, or some people are doing homeschooling and reading little chapters of our books in the middle of their routines with their kids, and that's great to hear stuff like that. They're all catalyzers for conversation, because it's difficult to just sort of force a conversation like this onto people who are kind of like on the fence or in the normie land. So sometimes it's a good mediator just to have something like that. So thank you for doing it.
They're fantastic. Thanks.
I saw Ginger wrote some. I didn't read. I just saw Ginger wrote something. I'm losing track of the chats. I'm sorry. I'll just ask anybody who wants to ask a question. Feel free to just unmute.
I got one.
Oh yeah, dude.
Since we're talking about Freemason and the such, would you know about Manly Palmer Hall?
Sure.
We never discussed about him, and I watched a couple of his speech, and he doesn't look like quite an evil dude. So I was wondering if he was a Freemason of the past.
Oh
yeah, this guy.
His secret.
Whoa, yours such bigger than mine.
Yeah, it was hard to find the unredacted one. They tend to make them redacted, where they cut out a lot of it.
I'm coming back.
It's a really influential. Are you still there? Okay. Anyway, it's a really influential.
Here's mine.
Oh, you got a really tiny one, eh?
Ooh. It's tiny. It's not the same thing.
Oh, somebody robbed you. Okay.
Yeah, somebody robbed me. Good. Where did you find this one?
I ordered it online.
You read it all?
No, I didn't read it all. It's very big. But
what's your take about this guy?
Oh, it's pure Canadian. It's just Blavatsky. There's nothing original in here. Oh yeah, it's all in Isis Unveiled, and a mixture of morals and dogma with Albert Pike. There's not
like a Cosmic Fire. Blavatsky made the Cosmic Fire book. It was helpful to read and really confusing about astrology.
Sure.
Astronomy. Is it like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of mystical boogity boo. There's
so he's in the Golden Dawn kind of wave.
Yeah, he's a high level Rosicrucian. He believes in esoteric and exoteric knowledge. He believes he's part of the esoteric elite that can give public spins on diluted versions of what they believe.
So the big school he made, and all the people who went there, probably all brainwashed in a way.
I would say so. Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, he's 33rd degree, 33rd degrees, possibly a higher degree even, because you got degrees above the 33rd, right? It's like going to the black belt. Then you got like first dan, second dan. So they just keep on making degrees. It just makes them feel more elite, every time.
Do you think he's wise behind all this, or just Elon Musk kind of made thing? Because
he's smart.
Some of his stuff's not so crazy in mathematical way, I'd say.
Oh yeah, no, he's very conceptual. They're all very creative. I mean, like all of the people who go to that level are very creative, holistic thinkers. They just believe in some crazy shit.
They're just born in the wrong family.
Well, you know, there's things that they didn't examine about their purpose to life and who they actually like, what they're meant to do as far as like true self-examination. They skipped those steps and they used a bad method to build a cosmology and a sense of self. So it's very discombobulated. Like you don't. There's a simpler way of looking at metaphysics than the type of overly complex detail that they try to like spin together.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the answer.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I hope that helps. Definitely a lot of really, really nasty, bad actors were highly influenced by Manly P. Hall's works. I could say that. Yeah, anyway. So, okay. Joe, I saw had a question about something about the oligarchy being different. Joe, are you still there?
Oh, yeah. Hello.
Ginger had a question too, I think. Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what was your question about the oligarchy being different? I kind of half read that.
It's just the idea that, I mean, are they just people just like us? But maybe, like you were just saying about they don't have a kind of sense of themselves, or at least not a good enough grip on who they are as people in order to see that maybe some, you know, or do you really believe that some of them at some level know that their stuff is evil and they want to do it anyway? Because not having talking to any of them personally, I don't know if
Yeah, you
it's
know,
hard to.
I think ultimately, no matter what the details are of what the inner sanctum of like wannabe elites believes, I think that they believe that it's necessary to do what they're doing as far as doing evil, and I think they've got some logical backflips that they've done to justify how what they're doing is actually maybe even sacred to them, theologically speaking. I get that sense. I don't think that they wake up thinking, aha, it's great to be evil in a simplistic of a way. I think it's a bit complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you think they really believe that what they're doing, however you view it, is really like in the best interest of humanity, as speaking?
What they're doing?
At a very high level.
What they're doing?
Yeah. Do you think they're
my hypothesis? Okay, so philosophically, my hypothesis of the oligarchical principle is that they represent. I'm kind of like, I think that they represent a human suicide impulse. Psychologically speaking, but I'm not a psychologist. That's just where I'm at. I represent a desire to not exist. That you know, everybody has like
that comes from sort of self-hatred or something.
I think that there's deep within their psyche, probably a lot of it's subconscious, for good reason, a self-hate, because what they have been groomed to become is hate worthy. It's hateful, and so they have a justifiable self-hate. And because they're
project onto the rest.
They're projecting, right? So because they're ego-based, they look at the world through the filter of their own toxic, you know, inner selves. And they put that on all existence. So that's where you get, I think, the origins of the Gnostic creation myths of, you know, this Yaldabaoth creating the world evil in his own evil image, and thus everything created is evil. And to the degree that it partakes in it's more
it's
evil.
like a very abstracted version of how you feel about yourself.
Yeah. So in their sense, they've got a cosmology where they have an idealized sense of the good being in this state of non-existence, beyond the of nothingness, beyond the everything, which is this created realm, of which our bodies are like cages. Our conscience is like a cage that hurts our true sense of self-actualized liberty that we have to break free from. But in the reality is, it's actually way easier to abide by your conscience. That's actually the healthier, way easier thing to do that, because it's there for a reason. Help guide you in your mature. They don't want to think that way. They're kind of like in that infantilism. I find where like they're just having a temper tantrum that such a thing as a conscience even exists. That they have to like find rituals to break free of those senses of morality, those basic human faculties. They have to learn how to break. So it's and then they work young. They just they noted early on at some point that the earlier you start on this, the better the effects will be, if the young person doesn't commit suicide along the way, and they go through that process, like Matthew Huxley, right? Everyone knows Julian and Aldous. Who knows about Matthew Huxley, the middle brother? I didn't know about him. Cynthia pulled him up. She's like, "Hey, you know that there are 3 Huxley brothers?" I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, the one that nobody knows about."
Oh, he's called Trevelyan. Am I getting that wrong? But his name is Trevelyan.
Oh, maybe it's Rebellion. I forgot. I thought it was Matthew Huxley. Maybe that's a different Huxley. But yeah, their other brother that people.
The other brother who committed suicide because he did something with a woman. He's not. Nobody's
Well, he fell
sure
in love.
what.
He wanted to marry a servant girl, and his family is the Huxley family. They don't allow that to happen, you know. And he was a rebel, and so he couldn't live with himself, committed suicide, and he's, you know. But otherwise, there were great things planned for him. Great as, you know, like quotation marks. But yeah, so the oligarchy, they want to, they try to fuse opposites. It's like this evil version of the coincidentia oppositorum. So there's this very important, very good principled idea that emerged in Platonic Christianity around the lawful resolution of opposites through reason, where you don't merge good and evil. You recognize that evil is the absence of good, just like darkness is the absence of light. So you can get a sense of the identity of these seeming opposites by moving through reason to analyze the essence of what they are. What the oligarchy does through the Rosicrucians is they try to merge, or all of the Gnostics, it seems, going back to ancient times, and is they try to merge moral opposites or any type of. So it's like you have to channel the do things that help tap into the sacred and the profane more and more. And the closer you can get them into proximity, that they even.
I think I agree with you, but I think sometimes I get a little bit confused when you say what they try to do is that there's a kind of body of people who have got a long-term plan and they're kind of working towards it. Because I'm thinking of somebody like Bertrand Russell, for example. If you read his autobiography, what there is about little bits, it's clear that he had a very disturbed childhood, people dying around him, lived with a grandmother who was crazy in some sort of directions, but very powerful, and then developed a whole theory about life, which was that basically it's terrible and you end in death. Well, if you read what happened to him when he was a kid, it's quite clear that he was surrounded by death. When religion.
Well, yeah, but you can't learn anything. Yeah. I'll just say that you can't learn much from the autobiography of a grand strategist like a Bertrand Russell. You can learn some little things, but if you want to know their heart of hearts, they will never tell you what's actually shaping them, ever.
Well, but it's like you said before, it's like you have to infer certain things, but you're never going to have a conversation with these people. But if you read the thing that Cynthia wrote, very great passage about him saying about, my genius, the genius of humanity will die in the heat.
Yeah.
And if you take that,
he did believe that. No, he believed that. Yeah, he believed that.
Yeah, but I think if you strip it from its third person abstract and put it in the first person, it's him speaking, which clearly is.
Yeah,
this is someone who believes, he's very, very depressed.
It's ultimately self-hate, like I said, and they extrapolate on the whole universe. Yeah. So yeah, I think you can get a sense of themselves when you look at what type of model they want to believe the universe is as a whole, that it's all animated by the principle of death, and everything is moving towards greater states of decay and thus ultimate non-existence, back to our natural state of not being. So I think that's what they are. They're an abomination as a species, as a psycho-spiritual species. Physically, they could all repent, and self-examine, as some good royals have done throughout the centuries. There's some good examples of that, of men and women who broke from their profiles, even if they were high nobility, and saw their humanity. And
I guess my original point was, do you really think they're somehow separate and different from just humanity, who've had things happen to them from various, whether it's grooming by their family or blah, blah, blah.
No, they're humans. No, I believe they're human. Yeah. Yeah. Broken humans. Yeah.
But broken. Yeah. But whatever. Yeah. However you want to find it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, I don't want to take up.
Okay.
Thanks for trying. We want to ask that.
All right. Cool. All right. Ginger, you still have a question or a thought?
Yes. Just wondering what the best resources you would recommend to people who are questioning whether BRICS is actually a force for win-win cooperation and against authoritarianism and fascism, or so I just had a discussion today, and I put the two links that you just published on Rising Tide Foundation, the BRICS versus the WEF, and then the battle over closed versus open systems were the two that I recommended. But I just wondered if you had any additional ones. Yeah.
Those are pretty comprehensive, especially the BRICS versus WEF. How China kicked out David Rockefeller also is useful. I think I pulled, but it's hard, right? Because like there's so much there's the alternative media space is almost entirely dominated by a common narrative regarding it being all controlled opposition, and there's nothing good in there. I think you gotta have to look, if people want to get like a sense of the thing, they have to start regularly going to CGTN and just getting a sense of like what is the regular method of communicating information about the world from Chinese TV and their English language channels, and just like not believe what they're saying, but just get a sense of how they're communicating. How do they talk about Africa? How do they talk about their own history? How do they talk about themselves? How do they talk about the other? And just, but it takes time, right? To like just even develop a sense of that, to just, because you'll find that there's something remarkably consistent, cogent, and remarkably sane in how they speak about all of these topics. My book, volume 3, which Cynthia helped me co-write, The Birth of a Eurasian Manifest Destiny, is kind of thick, but also it's built on a whole bunch of what I find are scientific proofs to demonstrate why there is a real fight against the death cult from these countries, by looking at, well, what are they doing? What are they doing? Like not so much what do people say about them, but what are they actually doing on matters that pertain to depopulation or the opposite, or increasing abundance or increasing scarcity? What are they doing? And Cynthia in her Calypso's Island series, episode 2, that's actually been the most effective thing I found for people who think China's evil. That episode 2 is pretty effective, where she doesn't try to defend China. She's just like, after going through game theory, how it's evil, where it came from, how it made us stupid, like how it took over our policy making to make us, accept all these self-destructive policies. She spends like 12 minutes just simply saying like, now let's look at what different cities look like that have been built beautifully that don't destroy nature. And of course, these beautiful cities, it's just like a tour of gorgeous forests and cities, and in South Korea, Japan, and a lot of them are in China. And you're like, well, that's damn nice. Like, why don't we have anything like that? That's super technologically advanced and at the same time super in harmony with nature. And you're like, they built that in like 20 years. Like, we've nothing even similar to that on any level. So that works. She made no argument why China's good. She's just like, now look at what they've done. That's all. Isn't it? And nobody can deny that it's beautiful. Look at their high-speed rail systems and their maglev. Like, just look at how cheap it is to go like 2,000 miles for like $20, right? Easy access for 300 miles an hour or more. Where we're just, like, still driving on crap roads with 1950s technology on our trains. Like, it's embarrassing. But people don't know. They just don't know. So yeah, there's no easy answer. But I think those articles you shared are I think pretty good. The only other thing I would say on the BRICS is that the biggest argument I've had from Ian Davis and others that I've debated on the BRICS being evil is they make the common argument that it came out of a policy paper in 2001 from Goldman Sachs. Have you guys heard about this one? That's a common argument I've just encountered so many times. But it's like, they say, okay, the BRICS is a Goldman Sachs operation, and they cite this 2001 paper, which I finally got around to reading. And it's not true at all. It's like the paper itself just simply calls for bringing Russia, China, India, and Brazil into the G7 so that they could be controlled within the G7. And then the acronym of what's called the BRIC got its name as an acronym in that paper. But the whole thing was based on just like bringing these 4 countries into the G7 so that they could be more controlled. The actual BRICS that really came online with South Africa in 2011 is not the same thing at all. It's totally out of the G7. It's not that. So there's many points of contact or of things to discuss about it, but it's yeah. I don't know if that helps at all.
No, that's awesome.
Okay.
That's great. And you know, the archive.org being taken down is pretty devastating because for FDR, for a bunch of people who are skeptical about the work that FDR did and what his attitude was, you know, there's no better book than As He Saw It by his son, like just to show his development and what he was thinking and who he was working with and what he really thought of Stalin, and it's gone. So I was linking people to the book so that they could read it for themselves. Even if you just read the last chapter, it was so little to read. And it's not even there. And then the book's expensive and hard to find now.
It's like $90 for the cheapest copy of it. They made sure that they didn't put it in print. And I hope that archive.org gets back up and running on top of the Wayback Machine too, right? Like that's also hosted by archive.org. So
the Wayback Machine is already back up.
Oh, it
thankfully.
is? Oh, good.
Yeah. And by the way, guys, just so everyone, in case archive does come back up, whenever it's possible, whenever you don't have to borrow a book, download it. I've been doing that. Like get it on offline storage.
Good point. Yeah, I got lazy. I stopped doing that. That's a good idea. Yeah. Go ahead.
Matthew Crawford had some recent comments on archive.org. He says it's missing some information that it had before, prior to being taken down. He's got on Twitter, he tweeted some stuff.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I saw that the blog, Twitter's blog, I don't know who reads, I don't know what was on Twitter's blog, but everything from what was that? Is that what you're talking about, Ginger?
No, it's that one, but it's also, I can look it up real quick.
Okay. Yeah, for that, all of the entries, all of the saved pages from like 2024 to 2019, I believe, were all gone. And I find that very strange because I've been following that, and Archive themselves, they said that the database was not affected. So I find it a little bit suspicious.
Yeah. No, sorry, Ginger. Yeah, go ahead.
He said a dozen or so articles detailing sexual abuse allegations by the close circle of the Dalai Lama.
Oh, yeah. I would imagine that there was a purge. They probably didn't lose any time during that week. There's probably a purge. That's interesting. I mean, the founder of archive.org is also very suspicious. He's a disciple of Marvin Minsky, like early AI cult leader, back in the early 80s. I forgot his name now, but he, filthy rich, seems to promote this very specific, this very Bertrand Russellite view of freedom of the rights to freedom of information and freedom of expression, which is very limited because Russell would say like, I may disagree with I may think what you have to say is abhorrent, but I will die for your right to say it. And he's celebrated as this great champion of free speech, Bertrand Russell. But then at the same time, he's pushing one world government and talking about how great it will be to convince kids that snow is black by brainwashing them before the age of 10, right? So it's kind of like a little disingenuous. And I got the same sense from that guy's philosophy. It's very Russellian. So he's probably, because that's the other thing too, right? That's when I was working at a university, their library was purging tens of thousands of old books. Like all of my books from Abraham Lincoln's original writings were thrown in the garbage from Dawson College. And part of the logic from all of the like universities across North America, high schools, libraries have been purging books with the argument that, but it's all on archive.org. We don't need to take up physical space anymore when all of the books have been uploaded to archive.org. And it's like, well, now that you've erased like 80% of your physical books by a massive book burning that would make Hitler green with envy, now you're going to easily just unplug archive.org. Like how easy it is to now scrub archive.org, right? Yeah, very concerning. Very concerning. Not happy. Well, it's 4:38 Eastern time. Any last thought or question before we round it out for today? Okay. Well, this was good. Oh,
Can,
yep.
can I ask a question? Can I go?
You got your
Just
Indiana Jones moment in there. Yeah, just rolled into.
yeah. Just kind of piggybacking off of some of the things that came up earlier. This is something I've been wondering lately, because you probably some people know about this in here probably about this fraternity. It was in 2018. I'm from Holland. This was big news here. It was about a fraternity in Belgium. Some people might already start recalling what I'm gonna get to. It's this kid, an African kid, I believe, named Sandadia, who got killed in a hazing ritual. And all these details got unburied. It's a really, it's a really fascinating case that is still actually making waves here. But it's a lot of things that I've been looking into, especially with like Gladio, but also you guys' presentations, which were great that you posted from your speaking tour about the occult roots, kind of yeah, from the Templars to the Jesuits, that it all sort of pointed to this quite possibly being linked to this really long thread that ran through history. Cynthia, even in her presentation, she mentions Belgium, which that especially made my alarm bells go off. Basically, I started looking a little bit into fraternities after that and like the hazing rituals. And I'm sure I feel like I've heard you speak about this, Matt, but I just can't recall when. But do you know what the roots are? What like the occult roots, especially when it comes to the rituals, are for fraternities as a whole, really, and sororities, and especially, of course, like the hazing rituals, because to me it seems like it's modeled after an initiation ritual that comes from those types of currents throughout history.
Yeah, I've not I've not done that kind of work, but it's fascinating and I think it should be done. And if you want to do that work, I'd be happy to publish that.
Mm,
The Definitely the very existence of fraternities and sororities and like the Greek letter things. That's also a 19th century phenomenon, which is disproportionately big in the United States. There's not nearly as many of these things in Canada or even Europe. They're bad. I mean, you got things everywhere, but they're really concentrated in the United States. They got it heavy, and there's different versions of it, which I think you're right. Like there's something of a low level initiation process going on to prepare people who might find themselves in positions of usefulness to an oligarchy later on, which normalize things that should never be normalized. Thinking that as they become adults, mature adults, right? It's normal to go through initiatory processes, which partially degrade you and detach you
mm,
from your humanity in the degradation process, right? Whether you're the abuser or the abused or whatever. And then you do it to somebody else when you're in senior year, then you're the one doing the hazing, right? Abusing the next generation. So definitely psychologically, yeah, it's got that usefulness to it for an oligarchy. But I'd love to know like where this comes from. And Belgium's messed up. Cynthia was telling me in her research on Gladio and her book, Belgium is just coming up again and again as a center of missing children, Satanists. Like NATO, when they got kicked out of France, they went to Belgium. And Leopold, right, had a lot to do with it. Like Belgium's role over Congo is
right.
so evil and disgusting. I mean, even for an empire, it's like so bad. And a lot of it was ritualistic. It wasn't just for like, raping the poor to enrich the elites. It had a ritualistic aspect to it and that I don't fully understand. But yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's so these kids were all just real quick, like a little quick rundown on this case specifically. These kids were all tied to elites in Belgium. They even had to move the trial that was held to a different courthouse because one of the parents was apparently a justice at that very court, the first one. Just to give a little indication, because many of these kids' parents were attorneys, high-level attorneys. Even one of them was reportedly like a consultant for a PR consultant for multinationals, for instance. Very strange ties. And then there's like at least one picture of the fraternity like from a decade ago in Ku Klux Klan garb, just kind of casually several references, comments like from the inner circles among themselves to kind of jokingly referring to Hitler as a good friend, for instance, um, using like workout Führer as a nickname for one of the members of this latest iteration, for instance. Yeah. And indeed, like the ritual, anyone could look this up. This is like a pretty well documented case about Sanadia. It's really it's very disturbing. If you just look at what the ritual was, and it's exactly like what you said. It just started making my brain go off, and that's why I started looking into this case when it kind of resurfaced recently. Um, because yeah, they wear the same garb as the Knights of the Sepulchre, the Knights of the Hospitaller. I mean, all these like knight orders, they happen to wear the same kind of garb, as for fun or something.
Well,
I don't think these kids know all this history behind it, of course, but um, yeah, like there's a lot more to it. The fraternity's been disbanded, of course, but they also immediately started sweeping everything because again, their parents are elites and they know how these things work.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. It's definitely, it comes up in the creepiest of places, right? And the thing about the oligarchy is they have as above, so as below in a sense, right? Like the quality, the animating principle of the top of the system will find its emanations through every layer down to the lowest rungs of
Yeah.
the system, right? So there's like a little bit of an oligarch in every local gangland member. And every person, even at the lower strungs, has a little bit of the spark of the oligarchy that's been activated within them on different degrees, and it's kind of always like that. And if you have a good person, that's where it's like it's so powerful to see how quickly society can redeem itself and change and heal from like decades or longer of corruption. Because when you can get like an actual good leader who's like has substance, you you immediately get people resonate unconsciously to that in a very healthy way. It's much more unnatural to get people to take on oligarchical characteristics or instincts. It's much
Mhm.
harder for them to do that. Whereas healthy human behavior is something we yearn to on a subconscious level, but we yearn for that, and we need role models as well. So when you get a Martin Luther King, the transformation is electric, which is why the
Yeah.
oligarchy is so afraid of people drawing from that well, and then taking the courage to put into motion those that what they've drawn from as a spiritual source. But yeah, like I found it too on the Nazi stuff, like the KKK regalia. There was a British fascist organization, very powerful, 100,000 they say on a 1934 newspaper clipping I found. They described how there's 100,000 paramilitary members of it's called the White Knights or something, or the Hooded Knights, which was interfacing with Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists, and they would go around at night with Ku Klux Klan hoods in Britain in the 30s, and I didn't even know that was a thing. But yeah, and then they have it on the lower level too, right? Where they don't respect these hazed kids in Belgium. They don't respect them, but they put them through a lower level version of that thing for whatever reason. Maybe some of them are going to come out of it as the Unabomber, or I don't know. Like some of them are
Mhm.
going to be sacrificed along the way, and who knew that Ted Kaczynski was going to come out of his Harvard experience with a desire to blow up industrial civilization? Some maybe had an idea that was going to be the outcome, because they planted those ideas into him. But how many died along the way who didn't make the cut? So yeah, it's sordid. It's really sick. I wish we could end on a brighter note, guys, but it's where
I'm sorry. That's my fault.
But yeah, this is fun. I hope we can do this. Not I hope we'll do this again more. I waited like a year and a half to do this, so we'll do this more often. And yeah, I think next week we have who's the lecturer? I forget, but it's going to be a good lecture next week as well. So I'll catch you all guys next Sunday, and looking forward to it. Thank you again for taking the time this Sunday to chat with me.
See you
Thanks,
next
Matt.
week, everyone.
Bye, guys.
See ya.
Bye, guys. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt.